Now, in these experiments, these placebo-controlled experiments, you're not going to want to tell them, which treatment they're getting, right? I don't think they would want to tell them that, you're getting the placebo. That wouldn't make much sense, right? That'd be kind of silly. That's why in these kinds of studies, what they do is a blind study. So that's where the participants don't know if they're getting the actual treatment or not. My guess is that, once they get it, they'll just ask them, how do you feel? Or they'll have them fill out a questionnaire. I don't know. But in a blind study, you don't know what kind of treatment you're getting. You don't know which of the two treatments you're getting. That's better. All right. Again, you might, if you're studying the effects of alcohol on memory, right? You're not going to tell them, this is alcohol or this is the placebo. This is non-alcoholic beer. You're not going to tell them that. That kind of defeats the purpose. So it'd be kind of silly. So for that, they would probably use a blind study. They could take a step further, as over here, and form what's called a double-blind study. In that case, the ones administering the study, the ones dealing directly with the participants, they don't know who's getting the placebo and who's getting treatment. They may not know. I mean, the people running the exam might, running the study, administering it, but the ones who actually deal with the participants, the people in the sample, they may not know who's getting what. So that's when you have a double-blind study. The patients don't know, and the ones who deal with the patients don't know if they're getting the placebo or not. Oh, that was fun. Here's another one. So we want to know if these are experiments or observational studies. So for the first one, you have a group of students. They're told to listen to music while taking a test. And their results, I guess how they're doing on the exam, their scores or whatever, they're comparing it to a group that's not listening to that music. You have one group that gets a treatment, right, the music, one group that's not getting the treatment, but they're administering it somehow. So that would be an experiment. The first one is an experiment. What about two? Well, in this case, they're just observing, right? They want to know the temperature. They're just observing what the temperature is. So if they're only observing, they're not like administering anything. Hence, it's an observational study. So we have this. So in one case, there's two groups of people, but they're administering something. There's a treatment they're giving. In this case, they're giving them music to listen to. That's why it's an experiment. In the second one, they're just observing. So in that case, we just have an observational study, temperature that is. And they're, they are measuring it, but they're just observing it. They're not administering anything. Oh, there we go. Okay. Good. Are there any questions on this? Okay. All right. So there's different kinds of data you can actually obtain from this, right? Here, you're getting temperature. Temperature is numbers, right? Like if it's in Fahrenheit, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty cold. Those are numbers you can mess with. You can do calculations with. In number one, I don't know how they're recording the scores. They might be doing numbers like out of 100, 150, 90, whatever. But what if they're doing letters like A, B, C, D, F, that kind of thing? The letters can't do calculations with. In other words, there are different kinds of data here. You have categorical or qualitative data. This is what I like to call it, qualitative. The book mostly focuses on categorical, but this is the kind of information that you can't do calculations with. That's what's happening here. I mean, you could break up the data into different categories, but it's the kind of data that you can use to break up into different categories. You can classify the objects into different categories. Like favorite eye color, what letter grade you got in an exam, things like that. You don't do calculations with different colors, right? Green, orange, yellow, you don't do that. And letters also you don't do. Or what's your name? Names also would be qualitative. As opposed to this, which is quantitative. That is the kind of data you can do calculations with, and they're numerical. I mean, you got to be careful, actually. I should be careful, because just because they're numbers doesn't mean you could do calculations with them. The example here is, someone might ask you how many movies you watched on Netflix in the last month. That would be quantitative data. The titles of the movies, I haven't watched movies lately, but the titles of them, that would be qualitative. Quantitative would be the number, like 0, 1, 2, 3. So those things you could do calculations with. There's some other data, like how much money you spent on candy. I just did something like this. $3, $6.50. That should be a period, not a comma. Things like that. That would be quantitative data. Again, you can do calculations with this. You can get the average price. You can get, how much you spent in total. You can get that. Or, for instance, this one I came up with because I like to run on the track on campus. We have miles, right? Like how many miles you ran in a week. 4 miles, 1.24 miles, 6 miles, 8.5 miles. These are numbers. They represent, you can do calculations with them. The total number of miles you ran in a week, or I know I didn't define what average is, but, the average number of miles you run a week. That would be quantitative data. But as I said before, not every number leads to quantitative data. For instance, Social Security numbers. I mean, assuming you're able to collect them somehow. These don't really represent amounts. It's kind of like a number that represents identification. Or like your student ID card. My student ID number, excuse me. That's not an amount. I don't think it makes sense to add up ID numbers of different students and see what happens. That doesn't make sense. So, ID numbers, Social Security numbers, phone numbers, zip codes, those are numbers, but they're not quantitative. They're qualitative, I guess, if anything. It wouldn't make sense to do calculations with zip codes. It wouldn't make sense to do calculations with telephone numbers. That wouldn't make sense. Okay. So we have different kinds of data. We have quantitative, we have qualitative data. All right. Well, here we have the answers already, but that's okay, I guess. Yeah. I must have forgot to take away the answers, but that's all right. But these are just different. This is just another example. Like age is quantitative. You might hear about the total age among all the people, or the average age for this. I don't know, whatever. That kind of thing. So age is quantitative. As opposed to, not as opposed to, the number of eggs laid by a chicken, that would be quantitative. I mean, here we have a sample of chickens, and we can ask, okay, what's the total number of eggs laid? That kind of thing. The total number of eggs you buy in a supermarket or something. I don't know. That would be quantitative. Or time. Well, actually, I should be careful. Time that you spend in line, like to buy groceries, that would be quantitative, right? It tends to ask what's the total amount of minutes people spend waiting to pay for groceries or waiting to buy something. That would be quantitative. It makes sense to, you could do calculations with that. I mean, you have to be careful, I guess, because 60 minutes is an hour and 60 seconds is a minute. You can still do calculations with them. Favorite color, favorite movie, or even favorite kind of movie, action, documentary, whatever. Favorite baseball team, the brand of toothpaste that you used most recently. Those would be qualitative data. So basically, the way to tell the difference is quantitative, you can do calculations with. Qualitative, if you try to, it's not going to make sense. Are there any questions on this? Okay. I'll just save that.